let me get this straight. The one movie in the multiverse saga that I think is just okay is the one that everyone else ends up loving? People love this freaking movie, man. Like, a lot of the movies in the multiverse saga I have been nice to because I did like them. Quantumania, Thor Love and Thunder, even Multiverse of Madness I've heard some people don't like. My brain must be backwards or something, I don't know. But alright, now that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has been out for about a week, let's finally talk some spoilers. So yes, that is a spoiler warning. If you have not yet seen this movie, I suggest you do that before watching this video because I will be ruining what happens in it. If you don't care and just like hearing me talk, well then you are perfectly welcome. Alright, let's talk Guardians. So the movie starts out more or less with Rocket Raccoon. He's walking around nowhere listening to Creep by Radiohead. And I like the fact that it is kind of keeping in consistency with the previous two movies, because all the movies start off with this opening title sequence with a character going around listening to a song. But in the first two movies, they were dancing to it. Star-Lord to Come and Get Your Love, Baby Groot to Mr. Blue Sky. But in this one, Rocket's going around listening to Creep. He's not really dancing, he's just kind of walking and singing along with it. I'm a creep, I'm a weirdo. Really does set the tone for the vibe of the movie, doesn't it? You're like, alright, this is gonna be Rocket-centric. It's gonna be his movie. And it absolutely is, who are we kidding? And it's gonna center noticeably more on the pain and emotions than the previous two movies did. So Adam Warlock comes in out of the blue, because he was sent by the Sovereign, who we remember from Volume 2, to take out the Guardians and retrieve Rocket. Which, man, when they're all fighting him, this is where I was talking about Nebula can do some pretty cool shit. Cause you see her, she flies up on her jetpack, whatever that is. I was like, that's cool. But really, it's her cybernetic arm. That arm can transform into all sorts of stuff. I thought that was awesome. Like, she transforms it into a sword and impales Adam Warlock. He's like, that hurts. But he does end up fatally injuring Rocket, which does set the whole plot of the movie in motion. Rocket Raccoon is fatally injured, but his friends can't operate on him because he has a kill switch built into him. So they have to go meet his makers. And it is around this time when we get the first flashback as well. The flashbacks are to Rocket's origin story, which, like I said, they're some of the best parts of the movie. Cause as we all figured, Rocket's origin is a very sad and tragic one. We see that he's part of a batch of other animals, batch 89, which includes an otter who names herself Lila, a walrus who names himself Teefs, and a rabbit who names herself Floor. And just looking at the four of them talk, you're like, this is not gonna end well. Sure enough, it turns out Rocket is super smart. So smart that the High Evolutionary is like, alright, we're gonna bring you in and kill the rest of his friends. Incinerate them. And that is what ends up happening. That was one of the saddest scenes in the movie, dude. Seriously? When Lila falls over dead and Rocket lets out that blood-curdling yell? Ugh, that was tough. And so Rocket scratches up the High Evolutionary's face, hence why later on it looks more like a mask, which I love that we see later when it's peeled off. He looks like Two-Face from The Dark Knight. That shit was gnarly. And he gets out of there. Really cool, but what the movie left out that I really wanted to see is how he met Groot. I wanted to see the two meeting. It would have been like Han Solo meeting Chewie. Oh well, maybe we'll see it in the future. But we do learn one more thing about the Sovereign, though. We learned that, yes, they were another creation by the High Evolutionary, which does totally make sense. You remember from Volume 2, they were all about perfection and design and the perfect society, which the High Evolutionary is all about, so that makes sense. You get the scene where the High Evolutionary is talking to Aisha, where he's like, I created you to be perfect, but your egos got out of control. Alright, maybe that is a little bit of a retcon, but it works. And so the Guardians learn that they need to go to OrgoCorp, since they are the ones who are behind the technology in 89P13. Rocket. And so they head over there, joined by Gamora, who has now joined the Ravagers. So yeah, I guess that's what she's been up to since the events of Avengers Endgame. She went with the Ravagers. Alright, that's fine, I guess. I like when they come in, we see one of the Ravagers is straight up a sorcerer, like Doctor Strange. Because we see portals opening up, I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
What's going on here?
You mean to tell me that the mystic arts exist out in space? What is this? That's news to me. So Gamora joins the Guardians on their mission to OrgoCorp, and really, this is the part of the movie that I had the biggest problem with. Honestly, the sole reason I gave this movie my discount rating is because this whole mission, this whole chunk of the movie, bored me. I was bored, and I'll tell you why. It was because we're still pretty early on in the movie. We're still in the first half, and therefore I knew the Guardians were going to succeed in this mission. There was really no tension. Nothing really exciting about it, at least not to me. It was another space mission. I've seen space missions a million times before. And so the whole time when they're infiltrating the lab, looking for the codes, taking on the guards, I was like, okay, yeah, Guardians, do your thing. I will say I did like the cameos though. I mean, not just Nathan Fillion. That one we knew was coming. I did not know that James Gunn's wife, Jennifer Holland, was gonna have a cameo here. I should have seen it coming, but I just didn't. I didn't even think about it. And I like the fact that her character was pretty much the opposite of Amelia Harcourt in Peacemaker. You know, Harcourt was a straight up badass who wasn't scared of anything. Her character in this movie, she gets hit, she's like, ah! She like freaks out. I like that. Props to that. And also I recognize Tiffany Smith as that announcer who's like, OrgoCorp was built for this. I recognize her because she used to be the interviewer in those like red carpet premieres back in the day. The premieres of Marvel movies that I used to watch on YouTube when they stream live. So that was cool that she got a part in this movie. But other than those cameos, I was just bored by this mission. I don't know what to say. I can't change my mind about that. And also it did kind of feel like a video game plot. Like they get to the lab, oh, we can't find the code. We have the file, but it's missing the code. So we have to go over here to find the code. We have to find this guy who might have the code in his head. And I was like, okay, so it's the video game plot trope. It's a space mission. So they go to counter Earth. And again, I was still kind of bored. Although, again, a couple of cool things do happen here. Like when they first land and the locals get aggressive, they're like, like they're gonna attack the group. Groot just goes big. He's like, I am Groot. He just grows huge. I was like, yes! Finally, a big Groot on the big screen. I've always wanted to see that. Even if it was just for a brief second, I thought it was awesome. And also later on, when they're falling out of the big ship and Groot catches them and he grows wings and they start flying or at least gliding, I was like, awesome! Like I said, Groot does some pretty cool shit in this movie. And that was it. It was sick. Of course, one of the biggest impacts this movie left on the Marvel Cinematic Universe was its very first official F-bomb.
Open the door!
Although I will say, depending on how you want to look at it, this might actually not be the MCU's first F-bomb. If you want to count the Netflix shows as still canon, Frank Castle, the Punisher, did drop an F-bomb in Daredevil Season 2. That did happen, so yeah, that'll be up to you. I personally no longer see those shows as canon, so yes, I do see this as their first official F-bomb in GOG T3. Great legacy for James Gunn to leave behind in Marvel. Fast forwarding in the movie, Rocket is eventually saved after he does have a near-death experience, which, yes, totally reminded me of the King's Cross scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I can't be the only one who thought of that. I refuse to believe that. I'll tell you one thing I really love that this movie did, is that it reminds us that Drax was a parent once upon a time. I love that this movie brought that back when he's interacting with the kids, and he's making little robot noises, or as he calls them, monkey noises, beep beep beep, because he did have a daughter, Cameria. We know this because he explained that in the first Guardians movie. So I love seeing that here because he is such a dad. That was great to see. Most of the humor with him in this movie made me roll my eyes, but his parenting scenes, yeah, those were highlights for sure. Also the Yondu cameo, when Kraglin's trying to use the arrow, and you hear in his head, Yondu's like, use your heart, boy! Again, I probably should have seen that coming because hasn't Michael Rooker been in like all of James Gunn's movies? Yeah, same thing with the guy who plays Peter Quill's grandfather. James Gunn certainly has his staple actors, and quite a few of them at that. I will say one of my favorite lines in the movie came from the High Evolutionary, and it's when he was like, there is no God, that's why I stepped in. It was right there when you figured out his real motivation. Cause yeah, he truly does have a God complex, that is for certain. No one can deny that after watching this movie. Even earlier in the movie, Gamora said that there are corners of the universe who see him as a God, but I just thought his line right there was really interesting. Plus the fact that Thor Love and Thunder really begs to differ with it. Cause in case he didn't know, there's a whole city, Omnipotent City, where all the gods hang out. So yeah, High Evolutionary, you were quite wrong when you said that, just saying. However, pretty soon after that, we get what I think is the most awesome action scene we've ever gotten from the Guardians of the Galaxy. And yeah, it's the whole long take set to No Sleep Till Brooklyn. That was so awesome. This big old long take where they're in the hallway in the corridor and they're just taking on all these guys, these mutant hellspawn things. Groot stretches his arm out and Rocket climbs on it and he jumps up. He's like, ah, with the gun. That was awesome. Although, gotta say, best part was definitely Nebula. She gets her head popped off and it's just swinging there for a second and she's still fighting and then it just locks back into place like, I was like, oh, that's so badass. That's why I'm telling you, Nebula is like one of the best parts of the entire Guardians story in the MCU. And of course, I gotta mention the coincidence with No Sleep Till Brooklyn. About a month ago, the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which also stars Chris Pratt, also featured that song. What a coincidence. Although I felt it worked a lot better in this movie. Another one of the best scenes in the movie is where Rocket saves all the animals. I mean, yeah, he does save this litter of baby raccoons, but then there are also a whole bunch of other animals, including a bald eagle, which I'd like to think is a cameo from Eagle-E from Peacemaker. But Rocket sees the plaque on the little raccoon cage that says Raccoon Procyon Loader, but then the High Evolutionary comes in and starts tossing Rocket around. He's like, 89P13! And then Rocket comes down, he's like, the name's Rocket. Rocket Raccoon. I was like, yeah! That was awesome. I love that. He finally admits, after years of denial, that he is, in fact, a raccoon. It reminds me of Morgana from Persona 5, who, you know, throughout the entire game, he's like, I'm not a cat, and then at the very end, he's like, I guess I am just a cat. It was great in that game. It was badass in this movie. Honestly, one of my favorite scenes. And so then all the Guardians come in, they beat the shit out of the High Evolutionary, and then Gamora impales him. Good, that motherfucker needed to die, like seriously, because he was a douchebag, and I'm glad he's dead. And so all the kids and creatures are rescued because Cosmo makes a big telepathic tunnel between nowhere and the big ship. And so everyone gets across, but Star-Lord almost dies in the void of space again. He freezes up, his face starts bloating, but then he is rescued by Adam Warlock, who I still hated in this movie because he is not Adam Warlock. But alright, everyone lives. None of the heroes died in this movie. Star-Lord didn't die, Rocket didn't die. Great. And so in the end, the Guardians of the Galaxy officially disband. This is our goodbye to this team of Galactic Guardians. Gamora goes back with the Ravagers. Mantis goes on a journey of self-discovery like Arya at the end of Game of Thrones, or Merrin after Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Nebula and Drax stay on Nowhere to raise all the little kids and creatures, which I'm really happy that they got their happy ending. When they're all dancing with the kids on Nowhere to Florence and the Machine, which I'll get to in a minute, I was really happy to see Drax dancing with all of them and Nebula smiling and dancing. That right there is what really made this feel like a happy ending for the Guardians. It was that dancing scene on Nowhere. I loved that. That was the feels. That felt great. Rocket and Groot lead the new Guardians of the Galaxy, which I'll touch on when I get to the mid-credits scene, and Peter Quill decides to finally return to Earth to reunite with his grandfather, which I love. Like I said, I thought that was a great way to end the story of this team of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, I agree with all the directions that they decided to go. I have no problems with it. And of course, Groot's line, "I love you guys." And James Gunn actually did come out and say that in that scene, Groot actually did say his normal "I am Groot," but we as an audience have spent so much time with him that, like the rest of the Guardians, we can now understand him. Which again, the feels. I love Groot so much. Yeah, I love you too, man. I want a big Groot hug. And so that is the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. In the mid-credits scene, though, we see the new team, being led by Rocket Raccoon, Big King Alpha Groot, love it, cause that is the Groot that I have wanted to see on the big screen from day one. And so again, we only get to see him for a brief second, but hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. Kraglin's on the team with his arrow. Adam Warlock is now on the team. I do kind of hope that we see him in more stuff so he can mature over a story arc, you know? And I don't know, maybe become the Adam Warlock that I am familiar with in the lore. More wise and stoic and badass, kind of like Vision. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I'd like to see that. And Cosmo's on the team. She's a good dog. Phyla-Vel's on the team. And their little pet merchandising is on the team. Alright, solid new group. Solid new Guardians of the Galaxy. And then the post-credit scene is Peter Quill talking with his grandfather. Which is funny, I love the newspaper he has, which says alien abduction, Kevin Bacon shares all. Right out of the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. And then text comes on the screen, the legendary Star-Lord will return. To which I was like, okay. I know Chris Pratt did say that he does feel cautious about returning as Star-Lord without James Gunn, which I of course completely understand. I'm sure we're all cautious about that. If any of these Guardians characters are gonna have further adventures in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it will be without James Gunn. And let's face it, Guardians was James Gunn's baby. He made Guardians of the Galaxy what it is. So it'll feel like George Lucas handing off Lucasfilm to Disney, you know? Like, oh, it was my creation, my brainchild. Here it is. Treat it well. I'm not against further Guardians adventures without James Gunn. I of course would like to see them. I was talking with some friends yesterday and they were all but certain that Rocket and Groot and their team will show up in Avengers Secret Wars, which of course I would be down for. Maybe we'll see more King Groot then. But as for Peter Quill's further adventures, I have no idea. Where and when will he return? Your guess is as good as mine. But in the end, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, like I said, I love the things I loved and I absolutely did love them. But then there were some boring scenes in my opinion that I couldn't help but be bored in. I just could not deny that that is what my brain did. So I am sticking with my opinion on the movie. But of course not once did I say it's a bad movie, because it's not a bad movie. It's good, and I hope you know I think that. Alright, so here's my question. Where do you think we will see any of these characters in the future, if at all? What are your thoughts? What are your theories? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!